Good afternoon. Welcome back to another episode of the LOTR LCG Progression Series. And today is a card review of the Withered Heath. The Withered Heath Adventure Pack. The first adventure pack of the cycle, the Arid Mithrin cycle. So, in the Wilds of Rovanian expansion, I found the Dale cards intriguing, and I liked the idea, and I wanted to play them, and I tried to play them against the quests in the Wilds of Rovanian expansion in progression style, but just couldn't make it work. I figured that to beat those quests with the Dale deck was going to take upwards of 10 attempts per quest, so I had to turn to a stronger deck to get the job done. I'm hopeful that the developers would continue to supplement the Dale concept, the Dale synergy, as the game progresses. So let's see. The hero for this adventure pack is Bjorn the Old. Bjorn, the hero from Overhill and Underhill, was one of my favorite heroes at the time. He fell off a little later as the game moves along, but he was phenomenal against enemies that could be destroyed by 5 attack. As the game moved along, there were more and more enemies that could not be destroyed by 5 attack, and then so Bjorn fell off. But at the time, he was one of my favorite heroes. So let's check out this hero, Bjorn the Old. He is 11 threat, 0/3/3, 5 health, Sentinel. After Bjorn the Old defends an enemy attack, spend 1 resource from his pool to declare him as an attacker against that enemy and resolve his attack. The defending enemy gets -2 shields for this attack. So Bjorn, the hero Bjorn, could defend against an unlimited number of attacks and then attack back for 5, one time. Bjorn the Old can defend against 1 attack, and then he can attack back functionally for 5. Although I would argue that 3 attack with -2 shields is better in most cases, but in a couple it's worse. In a couple it's only going to be attacking for 4, like against the werewolf from Wilds of Rovanian, it only had 1 shield. So in some situations that's going to be worse. In some situations it's going to be no difference. Will it ever be better? It's hard to say when that would be better. Usually reducing shields is useful for other players to assist you with the attack. What would be the difference most of the time between -2 shields and +2 attack? Except that -2 shields isn't always useful. That warrants further thought. But let's continue with the card. You can spend 1 resource for him to attack back right away after he defends an attack. He has 3 shields, so he's a better, more sustainable defender than the other version of him, Bjorn. And a huge change, he can have attachments. Bjorn was actually immune to all player card effects. Bjorn the Old can be healed, he can have attachments. He is, in my opinion, a very good combat hero. He is not a hero you can build a deck around. When I get to the end of this progression series, I'll do a tier list for all the heroes in the game. But basically I divide heroes up into 3 categories. The first category is heroes that you can build a deck around, and they are typically the card draw heroes. Elrond with Vilya, Gandalf, Aristor. There's some other minor ones, but those are the super strong ones that you can build a deck around. An elite deck. Bjorn the Old is going to fill a slot. So in a really good deck you need multiple ways to defend for 4, and you need multiple ways to attack for 4. And Bjorn the Old can't help you fulfill either of those. He's not good enough. He's not as good a defender as Baragond. He's not as good an attacker as, for example, Quick Beam, even Treebeard if he's buffed. The original version of Bjorn, the hero. So he's a very interesting hero. He's not good enough on his own to be elite. He's not good enough on his own to be an elite attacking hero. He's obviously not a card draw or resource generation hero. He's not good enough on his own to be an elite attacking or defending hero. He needs additional cards to make him work. With the additional cards, he can work. However, in a hero late ranking list, he would lose in his role to heroes who can fulfill the role without additional cards. Now, Baragond is a better defender, but he's worse at attacking. Quick Beam is a better attacker, but he's worse at defending. Treebeard is a better attacker most of the time, but he's a little worse at... Well, is he worse at defending? He's got 3 shields, right? Well, he's a little worse at defending because typically you're using Treebeard's health pool to buff his attack or his willpower. So, I think Grim Bjorn the Old is very good. I think he needs attachments to make him elite. And therefore he would lose in a hero tier list to Treebeard, I think, as an attacker, to Baragond as a defender. But neither of those heroes is quite as good at their off roll. Like Treebeard's a phenomenal attacker, but if you use his health pool to buff him as an attacker, then he's not as good at defending because he doesn't have a lot of HP to spare. Grim Bjorn is interesting, very interesting. He's not elite at anything, but he's almost elite at 2 things. And therefore a deck built with him in mind, with cards to buff his actions, give him multiple actions, I'm thinking, possibly give him additional shields, possibly give him additional attack. Any of those would be good options. He could even have Armored Destrier if you wanted. He could be turned into a beast of a defender, a beast of an attacker, or some combination of the two. But he's going to be a little bit slower and a little bit more difficult to play than the cards I mentioned earlier. Baragond, Treebeard, even Quick Beam. Because he requires cards to get up to their level. Now let's compare him to other cards with similar stats, like for example Gandalf. Well, Gandalf is obviously a better card. For 3 threat, you get 3 willpower, and you get his insane card draw ability. But Grim Bjorn isn't trying to be Gandalf. He's not trying to be the card draw hero that you build your deck around. Compared to a hero like Amarthiel, who has 1 willpower, 3 attack and 3 shields, and 3 HP. Grim Bjorn costs 1 more threat, and he has 2 more HP, and the ability to spend a resource to do both roles, whereas Amarthiel generates a resource if you're engaged with 2 enemies. Grim Bjorn's ability is easier to make use of than that. He'll require playtesting, but I like this hero. I think he's very close to elite. He may even be elite. At least he's very interesting. There are lots of possibilities, lots of different ways to take him in terms of building a deck, because he can have attachments and he can heal, so you could have shields, additional attacks, additional action advantage to take advantage of it. I like him. Good hero. Guardian of Ezgaroth. 2 cost 1/1/1. Guardian of Ezgaroth gets +1, +1, +1, and +1 for each different player card attachment it has. Okay, well the previous Dale cards, I think this is a great card for the Dale deck. 2 is pretty cheap, and then you can ramp him up into the late game. I love this card. This is exactly what Dale synergy needs to make it better. It's really good. That's a perfect card for the Dale synergy. I wish it had been included in the Wilds of Rovanian expansion. I could have played perhaps the Dale deck against the Wilds of Rovanian quests. At least had a much easier time with this card. I think it significantly increases the power of the Dale deck. So far, Grim Bjorn the Old and Guardian of Ezgaroth. Just with those two cards alone, I would say if you want to play Dale, this is probably a must-buy adventure pack. And you'll get Grim Bjorn the Old as well. You may just want it for Grim Bjorn the Old. I'm liking this adventure pack a lot so far. Guardian of Ezgaroth is a great card, a must include in a Dale deck, I think. And it makes the Dale deck significantly better. Squire's Helm. Attached to an ally, restricted, limit 1 per ally. Attached ally gets +2 hit points. Okay, that's fine. I'd include it in a Dale deck. For sure. Well, not for sure, but I'd at least give it a long, hard look in a Dale deck. It's not exceptional. It's +2 hit points for 1 cost. Typically with attachments we look for +2 more than their cost, so I'd prefer 3 hit points to say this is just a flat out good card. It's not, outside of a Dale deck. I wouldn't probably look at it much, but in a Dale deck, since it pays for itself with Bran, Son of Bane, it's very good and well worth a long, hard look. Woodman's Clearing, 0 cost, attached to a location, limit 1 per location. When attached location leaves play as an explored location, the first player reduces his threat by 3. So this is functionally equivalent to Elrond's Council in terms of the amount of threat reduction it provides. Elrond's Council also includes +1 willpower and is easier to play. This is a little harder to play, probably because it's in lore, and lore doesn't usually have threat reduction, but it's not so much more difficult that I would consider not playing this. If I was playing lore and I needed threat reduction, I would play this. Now, it's hard to talk about this card without talking about cards that are coming in future adventure packs, which take advantage of cards that attach to locations. So we'll attach a huge asterisk to this card which says, look at again when the next adventure pack comes out. If you are not familiar with what's coming next, I won't spoil it, but I have looked ahead a little bit, and I do know that there are synergies coming for cards that attach to locations. So this card is fine and would definitely get played in such a deck because it does close to enough, and with the additional synergies, it's good. The Hidden Way. At the beginning of the quest phase, search the top 5 cards of the encounter deck for a location, make it the active location, returning any previous active location to the staging area. Then reveal 1 less encounter card this phase to a minimum of 0. Costs 2. So you get to choose your encounter card. If you don't have an active location, you get to choose your encounter card and remove it from staging without paying the travel cost. That's pretty strong, but not always, because sometimes you're going to look at the top 5 cards of the encounter deck and you're going to see a location there that doesn't have any travel cost, and sometimes, which means you're still getting it out of the staging area for free, but not necessarily using this card optimally. And given that it costs 2 resources on a card, I think it does need to be used optimally to make that worth it. I don't like one-time effects. They have to be really, really strong before I'll play them. And just paying 2 costs to choose a location as a staging area, or choose a location as your encounter card, and then immediately make it active without mitigating any kind of nasty travel effect. It's okay, it's not terrible. It doesn't help with the... Increasingly we're seeing locations that have a forced effect after a location becomes the active location, which isn't a travel cost and therefore can't be mitigated by a card like this. I think occasionally this card will be very, very good. Occasionally, often it will just be okay. Occasionally it will be bad. Sometimes you won't have a location in the top 5 and then it just does nothing, and that's awful. You're going to be really sad when that happens. Often you're just not going to want to spend 2 resources on it. Early in the game you're going to want to spend the 2 resources building your board state. And so it's just going to sit in your hand during the early game. That's the problem with one-time events. Unless they're really, really strong, they almost always fall by the wayside while you build your board state. Unless they're free or contribute to building your board state. But this doesn't, and so it's going to be an inconsistent card. There will be times when it'll be really, really good. There will be a lot of times when it's okay. And then there'll be some times when it's not that good. Like, for example, if you are returning an active location to the staging area which doesn't actually result in any threat reduction. Or if you look for a top through the top 5 cards of the encounter deck and didn't find any location, that would be terrible. So, good when it works perfectly, but probably too inconsistent to play. I think there are better ways to deal with locations. And most of the time, a deck is going to be well equipped to deal with almost any encounter card that comes off the deck. So the value of being able to choose the one you want is not as high as you might think at first glance, in my opinion. I wouldn't attach a lot of value to that. So, inconsistent card, I would say. Bjorning Skin Changer. 2 cost 1/1/1, 3 health. Choose a Bjorning ally with printed cost 3 or more in your hand or discard pile. Discard Bjorning Skin Changer to put that ally into play. Bjorning ally? Are there any others at this point in the game? Let me check. Okay, there's a couple of others. There's a Bjorning Beekeeper from Conflict at the Karak, which is 4 cost, so it wouldn't apply to that. Bjorning Guardian from Crossings of Poros is 3 cost, 3 attack, 1 health, and after it participates in an attack that destroys an enemy, you discard it to place X progress on a location. So you could play Bjorning Skin Changer and then discard it to play Bjorning Guardian. That's effectively cost reduction of 1. And draw a card if you're playing it from your discard pile. That ally isn't that good, and that's its only use right now. That's the only Bjorning ally that costs 3 or less at this point in the game. Except for another Bjorning Skin Changer, which that wouldn't be helpful at all, since you have to discard this card. That's an odd ability. Even looking ahead, there are no more Bjorning allies coming with printed cost of 3 or less, so literally the only cards this could be used on are Bjorning Guardian, which is just a 3 cost, 3 attack ally, and Bjorning Skin Changer. So unless there's like insane synergies coming from putting Bjorning allies into play or discarding them or something, this card is a puzzling one. I don't see a reason to play this at all. I do not think that is good. One cost reduction out of the tactic sphere is hard to come by, it's true, but you want that 1 cost reduction to be versatile, not only usable on one specific card that isn't that great. So this card is a puzzle for me. It's been a while since there was a card that I didn't know why it existed. I don't see this as being a functionally very fun card. I don't see it as being particularly useful. I don't know why it exists. Perhaps, yeah, there may be more cards coming that will make this make sense. But right now, I can't imagine a scenario in which I would play this. I don't think a Bjorning deck would be very fun from a thematic point of view right now. Though you could make a thematic one just for the sake of theming, but I don't think it would be that fun to do. Not like Dale or like almost all of the synergies that have come before. I could see some fun in playing them. The Bjorning one, as of right now, I don't think so. Bjorn's Rage. After one cost, after a Bjorning character is declared as an attacker or defender against an enemy, that enemy gets -2 attack and -2 shields until the end of the phase. Well, I guess that gives you a reason to play Bjorning Guardian or Bjorning Skin Changer, but since you could also use this with Grim Bjorn the Old, I'd say that's its primary use. -2 attack and -2 shields for a one-time event. It's okay for one cost. It's okay. You need extra resources to do it, because if you were playing it with Grim Bjorn the Old, because you probably already want one resource to use Grim Bjorn the Old's ability. So would you be happy then gaining additional -2 shields and the enemy gets -2 attack? It would buff Bjorn to functionally 7 against a very difficult enemy. That's good, but there are other ways to give +2 attack. The enemy gets -2 attack, so it wouldn't do as much damage against Bjorn. This would be only really useful. I think its ideal usage is on Grim Bjorn the Old, and it would have to be a very high attack and very high shield enemy. Like, very high meaning at least 4 attack and at least 4 shields in order to make optimal use of this card, and that's not very many enemies. And that means a lot of the times you're getting a suboptimal usage, or it's just sitting in your hand. The eternal struggle with one-time events. So, an inconsistent card. Even with Grim Bjorn the Old. If you're using it with Bjorning allies, at this point I would ask why you're playing Bjorning allies. So I guess it could be a thematic card, because that's great. Thematic decks are fun. Long Lake Fisherman. That's another Dale ally. It's 2 cost, 1/1/02. After Long Lake Fisherman enters play, name a number. Then search the top 5 cards of your deck for a card whose printed cost is equal to that number and add it to your hand. So you draw a card sometimes. Most decks aren't going to play more than, 30% of the same number, and that's pushing it. So maybe it's hard to calculate the math on that exactly. You're going to draw a card some of the time when it enters play. I don't think that makes up for its low stats. There's already a number of Dale allies we want to play, but I guess if you need another one because you got more attachments, or I don't know, I think this card probably falls by the wayside in favor of other Dale allies. I think the card slots are going to be more valuable than this card is worth, because you're going to want to use other cards other than this one, but it's possible it makes the cut in Dale decks. It's not good in non-Dale decks. I think its draw ability is too inconsistent to make up for its low stats. Depending on the deck, depending on how many of each cost you're playing, but it does have a little bit of skill involved, because if you keep track of which cards have come out of your deck, you can have some idea of what the most common number is, but I think it would have to draw a card every single time it enters play to make up for its low stats in a non-Dale deck. In a Dale deck, it may make the cut in some decks. It depends what other cards you want to run, how strong you want your Dale synergy to be. It makes the cut in a thematic Dale deck, but in a Dale deck that's really trying to be powerful and defeat elite quests, it might make the cut, it might not. It's pretty borderline. It's cheap, that's good. Grey Cloak, 0 cost, attached to a spirit or scout character, limit 1 per character. Exhaust attached character and discard Grey Cloak to choose a non-unique enemy in the staging area. That enemy does not make engagement checks against you this phase. Okay, so basically, in a Dale deck, you play it for 0 cost. You play it on Guardian of Ezgaroth, or you play it on your hero to, like, brand, perhaps, or a bard. You play it on them to add to King of Dale the cost reduction, or to add +1/+1/+1/+1 to Guardian of Ezgaroth. And then you get an ability which is occasionally useful, but not that often useful, should you need it. It's not good outside of a Dale deck. Typically you don't want to keep enemies in the staging area, you want to get them out on the turn they enter, if possible. Sometimes you get an enemy that's too big for you, especially in a Dale deck, which is a bit on the weaker side early because it needs combos to get rolling. Attachment and character combos. So perhaps this card is intended to cover the early game weakness of Dale, which it helps with a little bit. But it's niche, it's not good outside of Dale. And inside of Dale, it's not bad. It's 0 cost. It can help you get rolling early. That's probably its point. Like, this adventure pack does seem particularly focused on covering the weaknesses of Dale. Most like the Wilds of Rovanian came out and people discovered you couldn't, like me, discovered it was very difficult to play the Dale decks against the quest, and so the card developers were like, alright, well, we'll take care of that. We'll add some new cards to help you out. And I think they succeed at that with these cards. Grey Cloak, Guardian of Ezgaroth, they do increase the power and playability of the Dale deck, which I appreciate. The Arkenstone. It's another guarded attachment player card. 1 cost attached to a hero after it's not guarded anymore. Each unique character you control gets +1 willpower. Reduce your threat by 2 to attach the Arkenstone to a hero controlled by another player, and raise that player's threat by 2. Well, that won't apply to solo. So in solo, it's just a Faramir, or it's a sword that was broken, but it costs 1, but it brings a enemy or location out of the encounter deck. And it does specify enemy or location. I think these guarded cards would be much better if they didn't specify that, and you could sometimes get a dud. They'd be very playable. I don't think they're overpowered. I'm not sure they'd be overpowered with that if it didn't specify enemy or location. As it does specify enemy or location, I don't think this is much different than the last guarded attachment I saw. I don't see it as being very playable. Upside with corresponding downside isn't really my thing, because in the early game you usually can't take the corresponding downside. Like, you're never going to want to add an additional enemy or location to the staging area in turn 1 in true solo. The early game is too precarious in true solo to do that, and which makes this card bad. It's just a blank card in the early game, and blank cards in the early game in solo are not good. They got to be really exceptional in the late game, and we already have 2 ways to do this effect with Faramir and with Sword That Was Broken, and so even though those are more expensive cards, even Visionary Leadership has a similar effect, just not as all-encompassing. I think this card is very good if it didn't have this guarded caveat, but it does, so what more can you say? You're not going to want to play it early. You're going to be sad when you draw it in the opening hand, and it's unique, so the extra copies of it are going to be a dud. Those are large caveats for an effect which is good, but not game-breaking, so I think this is kind of over-adjusted in the negative direction. Like, they made a card with a good effect, but then to compensate for the good effect, kind of made the bad effects too high. At least that's the way I see it. But I like this expansion a lot. I love the hero, Grim Bjorn the Old. I love the Guardian of Ezgaroth, and I think Squire's Helm and Grey Cloak are very reasonable inclusions in the Dale deck. And Woodman's Clearing is a card that will improve, I think, in the future. And the Bjornings are just puzzling. I don't understand them. At least the Bjorning Skin Changer I don't understand. Bjorn's Rage I understand, but I think it's too inconsistent along with the Hidden Way. But A lot to like here. So thanks for watching.